Welcome back to Candid Talks About Sex for Saints, where we get candid about love, sex, wellness, and relationships. Just so you know, I am Tammy, a wife, a mother, best-selling author, your favorite intimacy and relationship coach, the host of this fantabulous podcast where we gonna promote sex and still keep it God. And I got a question for you. Have you ever wished that someone had taught you more about sex from a faith-filled perspective? Or have you ever had questions that no one could answer? Or felt like if you knew then what you know now, you might have made some decisions differently? Well, let me tell you, you are not alone. This podcast is dedicated to just that. We're going to fill in the gaps. We're going to break some silence and help you to grow in godly intimacy without shame. And y'all, today's Married Sex Monday episode, we are going to be talking about marriage and masturbation. Y'all, this is the Sex for Saints podcast, right? I mean, like, really, is it the Sex for Saints podcast? Because we're going to talk about it. If we're going to talk about it, we're going to talk about it. But when I tell you, I am always getting asked this question, whether or not it's allowed. Is self-pleasure allowed to do when you're married? Are we allowed to do it if we're single? We are going to do a deep dive, whether you should, whether you shouldn't, the pros, the cons, all of it. I didn't even know that I could talk so long on this subject, but honestly, I could have gone longer. So let's get into it. Let's get ready and let's dive into the conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. I want to be honest. A lot of people, when they come to me with this question, the majority of the time, it's because they want to know, is it okay? And every time I answer, I get people who are like upset because it's not a yes or no answer. Now I know my Bible thumpers are going to come on here and they're going to be like, "Oh, it's masturbation. It's an automatic no," but it's not. It's not, because this is something that is very layered, and I'm going to explain, because for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be talking about it more in the context of a marriage, and I will address a little bit as it relates to singles. But in the context of this video, I want to speak to my marriages. I want to speak to my married folks, because this is, after all, it's Married Sex Monday. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about masturbation and what that truly means, okay? I often get this question, not just from married folks. I get it from single folks. I get it from husbands. I get it from couples who've been married for 10 years, for 20 years, for 30 years. I get it from a variety of people. And when I tell you, it's a hot taboo topic. It, like, when you think about toys, a lot of times you think masturbation. It's on that same par of discomfort. I want to talk a little bit about, as it relates to self-pleasure, there is a lot of silence and there's a lot of shame. And I do want to say that it started somewhere in the church. Okay, I'm going to be open and say it started somewhere in the church, because the church has always had two extremes. Either, there is total silence when it comes to anything sexual, or there is total condemnation when it comes to anything sexual. It is never addressed in a way where, sex is something that is glorified by God. It's usually addressed in a very toxic purity way. It's usually addressed in a toxic way, but disguised as a purity way, okay? And because the message has been framed like that or packaged like that, it has damaged so many people when it relates to anything sexual. And so the result has always been that, believers, they would grow up hearing, sex is so bad, it's so bad, it's so bad. And then all of a sudden, when they get married, it's supposed to be this one beautiful thing. But keep it in mind that, as they grew up, they've been hearing about toxic messages. The toxic messages and the purity messages has definitely overridden the preaching or the teachings as it relates to sex being glorified by God. It's more focused on the abuse around sex, the sinful nature of sex, as opposed to the glorifying of God through your sexual experiences through marriage, okay? So I want to address that first, because when you do get married and you're thinking about, all these beautiful things as it relates to marriage and the sexual experiences, you're thinking that I'm going into this experience, going to enjoy this thing with my spouse. You're not thinking, oh my God, I'm traumatized by the messages, until you get married, and then you realize that everything that you have been taught, it just doesn't automatically shut off. And that becomes an identifiable problem. And a problem that is not only identifiable, but something that you probably did not anticipate. A lot of people, when they get married and they're like, oh, I'm so excited, I finally get to, do this act with my spouse. And then they realize that there's a lot of shame attached to it. There's a lot of discomfort attached to it. There's a lot of, I'm not even sure if I should do something like that, right? And so I want to talk about it a little bit here. Now, I want to address something, because I read a post the other day with this girl. She posted on social media, and she was talking about, it was her and her spouse's, their anniversary. They're both Christians. And for their anniversary, she wanted to, take things up a notch. She wanted to spice it up a little bit in the bedroom. And so she went to her spouse and she asked him, she's like, hey, let's spice things up in our bedroom. It's our anniversary. I want to do something different. We're doing the same things over and over and over again. She asked him, what is it that you want to do? He told her. He was like, I want to do it. When she heard the message, she took that back. She ran with it, and she over-delivered, okay? She over-delivered to the point where on their anniversary night, they did whatever they did. And the next day, not even the next day, she said after that night, her husband treated her completely different. He became shut down. He became silenced. He would not talk. He would not communicate at all. And she was wondering, like, what happened? What did I do wrong? And what, of course, did that do? It made her feel shameful. It made her feel dishonored. It made her feel disgraced. It made her feel like she did something wrong, even though they were trying to implement something new. And this is why I always talk about aftercare, the importance of aftercare, because after you introduce something new into your bedroom, it should always be followed by a period of aftercare where you are catering to each other's emotional needs, finding out about what did you enjoy about that experience? What did you not like about that experience? Do you want to implement this again? Did it make you feel some type of way? Aftercare allows you the opportunity to bond with your spouse, to, provide them with that security, whether it's nurtured through, embracing them with love, cuddling, this is where you grab the towel. It's all of the things that you would do after trying something new. And so they didn't have that experience afterwards. Immediately after, it was met with guilt and shame, and he closed off and he shut off. And then all of a sudden, he packed his bags, he went to his mom's house, and then the conversation that they had was he just didn't feel like his wife should be doing those type of things. He was embarrassed by it, and he mentioned that, he didn't want to, he didn't expect her to do those things. Like, he had a different picture in his mind on what she should do. And I mention this because when it relates to men, they usually also suffer from a purity message, but it's in a different way, because they are groomed to believe that their wives should be a particular way in order for them to be pure, right? They are groomed to believe that their wives can have no flaws and these things, and they should only do this and they should only do that in order to represent holiness. And that's not what holiness is. And so he has this whole misinterpretation or misunderstanding of what they should be doing within their bedroom. Even if it was something that he brought to the table. He said, I want to do this. And when she delivered, he was like, wait a minute, I wasn't ready, right? He began to feel guilt and shame and things like that. And he projected those feelings onto her, which ends up happening in relationships, okay? And I'm going somewhere with this. It ends up happening when you have that mindset of the purity toxicity that is just embedded in your brain. And so the reason why I'm mentioning this is because all of this relates to, how you correlate when you are with your spouse, okay? It all relates to how you correlate when you are with your spouse, when you are embracing your spouse, when you are intimate with your spouse. There are several factors that needs to be or is taken into consideration because you and your spouse should be on one accord. Everything that you do should be allowing you to become one. And so if you are in full agreement, right? If you are in agreement about what it is that you want to implement, then there should be no shame attached to that. Because remember, God is a part of your experiences when you are married. As long as you are not defiling the bedroom, meaning that if you are honoring your spouse, okay? If you are honoring them and keeping the marriage bed pure, which basically means I am keeping anything that is immoral or not honorable into my marriage, then God is a part of that experience, okay? But you and your spouse get to decide on what is moral and immoral as long as it does not violate scripture. The beauty about God is he allowed that space to be so beautiful that he limited what could not be done, because he wanted to leave up to your discretion on what could and could not be implemented. He's not there to basically say you can do this and you can't do that. He's laid out very specifically what you cannot do. And so what you cannot do is laid out in black. It's in the word, okay? You can go to Leviticus 18. It has a whole outline, and there are various scriptures that addresses certain things. Now, what we do is we rely on principles to help us identify the things that are not specifically labeled in the text. So when it comes to things like, am I allowed to, engage or indulge in self-pleasure? Am I allowed to masturbate essentially? It cannot be a blanket yes or no, because there are so many things that goes along with that. Now, being holy and being sexual is not opposite. These things coexist because God created you to experience both, okay? When God designed you specifically, he said, let us make man in our image. And that turned out to be an Adam, and it turned out to be an Eve. And when he created Adam the way that he created him. And when he created Eve the way that he designed her. He pulls her out of Adam's rib, and he said, this right here is you. You are the bone of bone and flesh of flesh. What he created was everything within her to complement everything about him. And that included the clitoris, y'all. I want to talk about it just a little bit. Women have a clitoris. And the clitoris has a plethora of nerves, okay? The clitoris has about 10,000 nerves or so. You'll find some research that says 8,000. You'll find some research that says about 10. There are new researches that are discovering new things as it relates to the clitoris, which are the amount of nerves that it has. So depending on which article you're reading, you might find 8, you might find 10. Nonetheless, it is twice as much as the male counterpart. Now, what I love about this is that the sole purpose of the clitoris is for pleasure. I need you to understand that, because women have an organ that is specifically designed for pleasure. About 10,000 ways to access pleasure in the nerves within the clitoris. The clitoris is similar to the penis, okay? Only the penis, the main function is not for pleasure. So God did something special when it came to you, okay? I need you to understand that. And so when I hear people talk about their sexual experiences and what they're not having, and I'm going to probably say this in every episode that I have, because I have had clients who have been married for 10 and 20 and 30 years and have never experienced an orgasm. And what does that say, right? What does that say? Probably, I don't understand my body. I don't understand my anatomy. I don't understand that I have a clitoris, and I don't understand how it functions. Because if you understood how it functioned, then how can you miss 10,000 ways to not orgasm every single time, right? And I say this very lightly, that wives, you are responsible for your own orgasm. I say that very lightly because I need you to understand that you are responsible. And so if you're not orgasming, if you are not getting the orgasm that you desire, it could be one of a couple of reasons. And what I'm finding, women within a faith-based community are afraid to touch themselves. They are afraid to explore themselves, and in turn, they don't understand their bodies. And then that's where it becomes an issue. Now you are relying on your spouse to please you when you are not communicating to him what essentially pleases you. And the reason why you're not doing it is because you don't understand what pleases you. And that becomes the problem. And so when I talk about self-pleasure and things like that, I'm speaking in the context of, knowing yourself, understanding yourself, and all of these different things, because we could talk about the purity message all day. We could talk about, masturbation all day. But the reality is there is no scripture identified that would say, thou shalt not masturbate. It's not there. And what is there is principles to guide, principles to allow you the opportunity to know, because what is present in scriptures? Principles that does explain purity, principles that explain self-control, principles that explain how to honor your body, okay? And this could be found in like 1 Corinthians 6 and 18 and 1 Corinthians 7, 4 through 5. Now, I want to touch a quote on my book. I have a book called Hey God Can I that will be released this year, okay? I am going to put a description with the link on the wait list, because this is going to be a book that you're going to want to get to know. It's called Hey God Can I. It's an ABC guide of sex for married saints. And why this book is important is because it explains all of these terms. Every sexual act or sexual term that you might have questions about is going to be labeled in this book, okay? So you can use it as a dictionary to be like, God, what are you saying about this? What are you saying about that? And it just gives very detailed information along with highlights to help you make informed decisions as it relates to the bedroom. It's not a book that tells you what to do, what you can't do, but it is a book that gives you information on, things that you might have questions about, and help you to understand, and it will help you to understand the importance of the idea that God had in mind when it came to your sexuality, okay? So I want to make that very clear. We're reading a quote from my book. It says, masturbation isn't just about touching your body. It's about what's happening in your heart and mind while you're doing it. The reason why I am mentioning that is because there are different analogies or different perceptions as it relates to sex. You have the worldly view, and then you have the godly view. When you're thinking about the worldly view, it's a matter of, what does the world think as it relates to masturbation, okay? The world says that we use it for self-care, solo. When you are masturbating by yourself without a spouse or in singleness, the world would say, this is how you use self-care, right? You got to take care of yourself, because while you are waiting for that person, you have to be able to make sure that you're satisfied so that you're not out there in the world, okay? That's what the world would say, self-care. The world would say it's a stress relief. Those period cramps, they're so bad. As long as you masturbate, it'll help the cramps much better, okay? Not debating science. That's a very factual thing. That's true. The world would also say it's instant gratification. I am getting the satisfaction that I need right here, right now, by performing this act, because it's allowing me the opportunity not to go out there. It's allowing me to stay away from EXO, that dude who I said I would never go by anymore. It's allowing me to, just be satisfied so I don't even have to make a phone call. Or it's allowing me to just be satisfied just because I feel the urge and I want to get rid of it. So I'm going to masturbate because I want that gratification. Oftentimes, the issue with masturbation is that it is fueled by porn It is fueled by fantasy. And when I say fantasy, it is fueled by a negative fantasy, what's going on in your mind, right? Somebody who is not your husband if you ain't married, right? Or something that is unhealthy or impure. It's fueled by something that's not of God. Now, when you think about masturbation, it's sex. Masturbation is sex. The reason why you do it is to fulfill a sexual urge, okay? The only difference is you are having sex with yourself. There's nobody in that process but you. Nobody in that process but you. And if you're married without your spouse or your spouse's agreement or whatever agreement that you have in place, then it leads to other things. We're going to talk about that. But that's what it is. But when you have a godly view, of your sex life and whether or not self-pleasure should even be involved, you go in with the mindset that your body belongs to who? It belongs to God, but not just God, because you are married, it also belongs to your spouse. The question that should be answered, or the question that should be asked is, am I doing something that is going to dishonor God and my body, right? Am I gonna be doing something that's gonna dishonor God or dishonor the covenant that I have with my spouse? These are the real questions. Is masturbation something that is gonna pull you away from your spouse or draw you closer to your spouse? Are you training your body to respond to yourself instead of your spouse? That is an issue. And could you invite God into your thoughts during that moment without shame? Could you invite God into your thoughts, into that moment without shame? These are very realistic questions, y'all, because these are the things that has to be considered. Now, when we talk about mutuality in marriage and what that specifically means, 1 Corinthians 7 says that your body belongs to your spouse and theirs to yours, not for control, but for cherishing, for sacrificing, for embracing each other. Now, some couples use mutual masturbation as a form of foreplay. They might use it as a form of exploration so that they can understand their bodies or connection. And together, that is not a problem. You guys are connecting. There's eye contact involved or something like that. Some people use it for health reasons, like there might be pregnancy discomfort. And so that might be a way that they can stay engaged with their spouse. Sometimes they might be traveling, and so they might communicate via video or via the phone, and they are completely engaged with each other, right? These are the agreements that they have so that those urges can be filled because they are married. Because why would they not? If they are married and they want to be connected, it's still connection. Some might just do it just to be connected. Sometimes people are doing it so that they can teach their spouse what feels good. Sometimes you have spouses that just enjoy watching their spouse. It could be a form of a tease. It could be something of excitement. It could be something about, this is what we're getting ready to do later. Like, there are so many different ways. And let me just fit this in here real quickly, because what you do in your bedroom should be between you, your spouse, and God. You should not be communicating outside of the Trinity what goes on in your bedroom, meaning you shouldn't be talking to your friends about what you do in the bedroom. Why? Because now you're giving other people an opportunity to form an opinion. I understand that there are certain things that might feel uncomfortable, or there are certain things that might feel like it's a violation. But oftentimes what you feel is a violation might not be a violation. Why? Because what shapes your mind around sex and the experiences that you have with your spouse is shaped by what you were brought up with, the messages that you heard as you were being brought up, the things that was taught to you, even the reactions about people talking about it in the environments or the spaces that you occupy. Okay? So I want you to understand that sometimes you might be talking about something, or sometimes you might be hearing something, and while you're hearing the information, you're internalizing that information which causes you then to feel a particular way. Another reason why the topic of masturbation might be uncomfortable, or self-pleasure might be uncomfortable, is because many times prior to getting married, there was a lot of sex that was had, okay? Let me tell you, I was celibate for 10 years, or abstinent, whatever you want to call it. I abstained from sex for 10 years. And it would have been 11, but that first year of me being abstinent, I struggled with masturbation. It was a constant thing. Could not stop doing it. I was like, I'm gonna take care of myself. I'm gonna please myself. I decided to do that because I wanted to refrain from all the people I was having sex with. And so because masturbation was a big part of that process, when I got married, it's a difficult concept to embrace. Because why? We struggle with things that we should not have been doing prior to marriage. When you think about God and his design for marriage, right? Think about this. If you and your spouse got married and you had no idea about anything sexual prior to, then answer me this. Would masturbation even be a thought to say that this is something that defiles God? Think about it. If you had no sexual experience and they had no sexual experience, and you were going into your marriage with a clean slate, nothing, no masturbation, no pornography, no sexual trauma, no anything like that, would you have considered masturbation to be a thing? Probably not. Because let's be real, this has only become an issue because of what you have experienced prior to. That's the only reason. So let's talk about that. Now, the key when you are in a relationship, the key is that there is communication. There is communication. You and your spouse has to be in communication about what's going on, how you feel about all of the things that's going on. You have to talk about it. You have to communicate about it. Because when it comes to coming together and implementing certain things within your marriage, implementing things within your marriage bed, you and your spouse always have to be on one accord. And I want to mention that too, because if you're doing something in secret, it's not connection. If you are doing something in secret, this would actually cause mistrust within the relationship. If you are self-pleasuring because you're not communicating with your spouse about something you don't like. For example, I had a couple who was not satisfied within her bedroom at all, but she loved her spouse. But the part of the bedroom area was an issue for her, but she didn't want to hurt his feelings. She wanted to protect his feelings. And so she was not orgasming. She was not having orgasms when she was with her spouse. But when she was alone, she would have them. And it was because she was masturbating. Matter of fact, she had trained herself so well that it made it even more difficult for her to orgasm with her spouse, because she had learned how to please herself so well that it didn't even matter whether or not she at that point, she was doing it just for him. But what was the problem? She was not communicating with him. She was not saying, babe, I'm not pleased. Let's work on this. Let's try to do something different. Let's try to do something better. Let's try some new positions. Let's work on this area. Because when you are engaged, and I want to make this very clear, because there is always going to be a fine line when it comes to self-pleasure, because you have to be so open and honest with your spouse that you don't have to do anything in secret. They should be completely on board and know everything it is that you're doing. They should know what's happening. There should not be a secret about what's going on, because if you're doing something in secret, that means you're hiding. And if you're hiding, that usually means that there's a problem. There's a reason for the hide, okay? And when you are hiding something, it creates disconnection. It creates tension. It creates mistrust. It takes that whole entire experience a different way, when you and your spouse should be communicating about the what shoulds and what not tos, and how can we work towards building something better. Because self-pleasure trains your muscles. It trains your muscles, and it will take a long time for you to untrain your body to now reprogram it to embrace your spouse. And so in the beginning, your spouse might have had an issue, right? But the moment now he wants to change, and now he's saying, let's work on this, now it's going to be on you. Now you're going to have the issue because you've trained yourself to not be pleased by your spouse. And so when you come together, now you still can't be satisfied because you did such a good job in training yourself. And that is a problem, okay? So I want you to also be careful and keep in mind that, you know, these things that are done comes with caution, comes with maturity, comes with a healthy mindset. We gonna talk about it. Let me go in order, right? Because I want to be all over the place. Because I want you to understand that, you know, self-pleasure should not be a replacement, right? It should not be a secret habit, because that's when it stops becoming intimate and then it becomes isolation. Okay, so when is it not okay? When is it not okay? It's not okay when it is replacing your spouse, when it's replacing intimacy, as I just mentioned. I just want to say this again for reiteration and according to my notes, right? It's not okay when it's done in secret, and it's not okay, and this is a big one, when it is fueled by things like pornography. Because first of all, pornography does not belong in your marriage anyway. It does not belong in your marriage bed. It does not belong on your TV. It does not belong in your household, okay? Let me tell you, when you watch porn, you are training your mind. You are programming it to be satisfied by something that is not even real. And your brain stimulates and functions differently when you use porneia, okay? I want you to understand that. It trains you not to be pleased with your spouse. It trains you to actually disconnect from your spouse. And so porn does not belong in the marriage. There is a ton of research out there. You can, I don't even want to say Google it, but you can, you know, chat GTP it. But you can chat GTP the research, and it will show you that there are statistics out there that shows you how damaging pornography is for your bedroom, okay? I want you to understand that. Now, another thing that is harmful when it comes to masturbation is when it becomes compulsive and when it becomes addictive, okay? Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because there are people who form certain habits, people who have been familiar with doing things like masturbation, and it's become an addiction. They can't stop. And the reason why you know it's an addiction is because it begins to influence your daily life. Now it's controlling your life. You can't stop doing it. Now it's a compulsive behavior. I gotta masturbate, right? These are usually, it would be classified in the category of like a sexual addiction. And even though there's not a real term that says sexual addiction, the same symptoms could occur, like the desire, the compulsion, the interruptions of your daily life and your daily schedule, and all these various things because of masturbation. Now, people who have struggled with addiction, any type of addiction in the past, it's something that you probably should not implement. If you struggle with any type of compulsive disorder, should not do it, right? Because you don't want to reprogram your brain to, you know, bring up these bad habits that you've had and be triggered into developing these same patterns and things that was toxic in the beginning that you had to work so hard to get rid of. And so I want to stress that because that's important. Another thing too is people who have experienced trauma or any type of sexual abuse or anything like that, these should not be instances where you are engaging in self-pleasure even with your spouse, unless you are in a mature mind. And a lot of times, a lot of people won't get there. A lot of people do not know how to detach themselves from their previous experiences, which is why masturbation is complicated. Now, there are people who are in healthy relationships, healthy marriages. They don't, it's not a matter of should I masturbate, because they do it within the confinement of their marriage and the agreement that they have, and it doesn't cause any problems, any friction. There's no fantasy involved. There are some people who think that you cannot masturbate without fantasizing, or if you are masturbating, you're fantasizing about something that is not your spouse. There are people who can, and there is a very small amount of people who don't require other fantasies created in order to engage with their spouse. There are very few people who have the ability to separate. And as a result of that, this is where the problems become, because there are so many people who have awful experiences, trauma experiences, addiction and pornography and ex-boyfriends and, masturbating to do this before I was married. And then when you get married, now it's like, man, all of these things are off limits because I defiled myself before I got married. I defiled myself. And so now you're projecting these things, or you're taking this baggage into your marriage without even having the proper healing that was necessary in order for you to be able to open up to your spouse in the way that God truly desires. I speak on this because it goes back to being single. When you are solo and you are single and you are masturbating all the time, let me tell you that it makes things so much more complicated when you get married. Now you are married to someone where you have trained your body to be pleased by yourself, or whatever toy or device that you use in your singleness, and then you expect your spouse to come in and do the same thing, but if not even more, which is impossible for him to even compete with those things when you have trained your body. When you add additions to your bedroom, it should not be like an everyday type of experience. But now you've trained yourself so much that you can't even let go without bringing something in, because your mind has been discipled into, I gotta have sex with my toy and my spouse, or I gotta masturbate with this while I'm doing this. Like, it's not a clean slate. It's a previous slate bringing into a present situation that you haven't gotten rid of. And so when it comes to self-pleasure, you got to do a lot of purging and clearing up your mind before you are even able to even think about something like that. And not to mention, when you are single, right? God is not a part of that experience. It's you and whatever incubus or succubus spirit that you've invited that carries on and moves with you. Now they think you're in a relationship. And if you don't understand about incubus and succubus, go ahead and do the research, okay? Because that's all I got to say about that. But the point is that when you are having sex outside of God, when you are single, it's you, whoever you sleep with, and whatever spiritual forces you invite in. But when you are embracing a marriage and God, it's you, God, and your spouse. It's the Trinity in your marriage. And God purifies that marriage. And I like to say that because when you come in with a healthy mindset and a pure heart and all these various things, and you take something, you say, man, if I touch myself, that's impure. How? God created these hands, right? He created your body from your head to your toe. And you use these things as a tool so that you can embrace each other together. It's not about this or that. It's how can you bond and connect with your spouse in ways that you haven't done before. I want you to understand that. In 1 Corinthians 6:18, the Bible explicitly tells us to flee any sexual immorality. In Amos 3:3, it also mentions how can we walk unless we have agreed. Now, I'm mentioning this not to condemn you. Prayfully, you have already repented. You've already said, God, help me deal with the issues of my heart. Help me deal with the issues that I've had as it relates to these things that I've done that has violated you, right? It's about repentance and moving forward with a different mindset and opening up as a surrender to saying, God, come in and help me heal from my previous experiences so that I'm not taking them into my marriage. I want to be able to embrace my spouse the way that you design, the way that you desire, so that we can get to know more of you. And that's that's right there is the power plug. I don't want you to be condemned in this message. I want you to understand the process, because anything that God has created or designed There's always going to be an enemy that comes in and try to distort what God has designed to be beautiful. And we want to make sure that when it comes to sex, this is why I'm so passionate about it. When it comes to God and intimacy, anything that he has done, it has to be God, because we don't want to distort it. We want to bring back that message that God designed sex for you and your spouse to be able to embrace each other in different ways. And there are a lot of things, there are a lot of moving parts happening, and all of that teaches you about the beauty of God. I need you to understand that, okay? Now, I don't want you to get frustrated while you're single. I want you to, just be encouraged and learn how to practice self-control and, redirect that energy into prayer, redirect it into, self-care, doing things for yourself outside of your normal activity. Find friends, find community, find accountability so that you're not struggling. When I was struggling with my issues, let me tell you, I had friends on speed dial, okay? I had friends that I could communicate with, that I could talk to, that I was completely open and honest with, because let me tell you, you got to find some friends who is real, who is down with you, who could pray for you when you are struggling, okay? That's the type of friends that you need to help you stay grounded in your spirituality when you are trying to walk the path that God has designed. It's not an easy one, but it's not an impossible one. That's why you need accountability and friends and prayer and worship. Let me tell you, ain't nothing like a worship. Now, me, I am a worshiper. I can get down on my knees. I can pray. I would go in my prayer closet and I would go to war. I would go to war, like prayer town, on behalf of somebody or even myself. And so prayer, like, we underestimate the power of prayer. And so if you are struggling with things like masturbation, and now you brought it over to your marriage and now you're struggling, for prayer always works. I promise you it will. I promise you it will. Now, back to my marriages, because I want to talk about, this isn't about can I not, blah, blah, blah. Because there are going to be some people, the Bible says somewhere in Romans where, if I feel some condemnation about it and I continue to do, if I do the act anyway, then if I feel some conviction, the scripture says that if I feel a conviction and I continue to do the act, or I proceed to do the act, then it's still sinful to do, because the conviction that I feel is real, right? We want to make sure that you're doing things that you're not convicted or feeling a conviction of, because what one couple feels as a conviction is not going to be another couple, right? What one can do, another can't do. What one can't do, another can do. And so you want to make sure that what you are doing still stays true to what you feel in your spirit, because God wants to train you to be obedient to your spirit overall. The key is finding out whether or not what I'm feeling is as a result of something that I'm being convicted of. Is it a result of what I've experienced in my past, or is it a conviction of what I've been taught, right? Is it a legitimate conviction? That's the goal. And how do you determine that? I'm so glad you asked, because in my book, I have what is called the undefiled test, okay? Now, the undefiled test is 5 questions that I have, and this is opportunity for you and your spouse to be able to connect and talk about what can we implement and what can we not implement. And this goes way beyond self-pleasure. And so the first question that I have, and you and your spouse are to engage in conversation about any and everything that you want to implement. And you can use the same exact undefiled test. I call it the U test. Now, the first question is it moral? Is it moral? Remember I said earlier that God says specifically what we cannot do. It's laid out in scripture. I think Leviticus 18 gives the clearest picture of what can absolutely not be done. Everything outlined in there, that has not changed. It stayed consistent through the Old and the New Testament. Okay, you'll find the same scriptures in the New Testament. And so that gives a very clear depiction of what is immoral to God. Now, the other thing is, that might not be clear is principles. The Bible says, there might be food for the stomach and stomach for the food. Not everything you can means that you should. The Bible says that not everything you can means that you should. This is where the convictions come. But the point is, you and your spouse should be talking about The first question that you always ask, whether or not it's self-pleasure or toys or implementing a new act, is it moral? Is it outlined in this book right here? Is it something that God says absolutely no to? Now, keep in mind that God gives you the ability to explore. There's a lot of things that you can explore about. Remember, I said that exploration, he kept what we could not do limited because he wanted us to be able to explore a lot of things that we could. I want you to keep that in mind, because when you're thinking about, is it moral, you go to God and you go to prayer and you and your spouse talk about it. You know what's absolutely not moral, and then you apply principle to everything else. Okay? I hope that makes sense. The next question that I have is, are my intentions pure? You never want to get into something with the wrong intentions. I remember I have a lot of people who come up to me and they're always telling me about, these things that they want to do or these shows that they have watched and things like that. One of the things that I always want to say is to be careful, because what the heart does, out of the mouth, the heart speaks. And I could even take it a little further and say, out of the heart, the mouth speaks, but also the heart controls the intentions and the actions of what we apply. So what does your heart say, or where is your heart? If, I'm gonna give you an example. I had a client who had experienced trauma. This is a male client, experienced trauma in their past. They had it was a lot of trauma going on. They got married. Spouse only knew a little bit about the trauma, but not a lot. But as it relates to the bedroom, when they were intimate, they would get very aggressive. They would get aggressive to the point where it made the spouse uncomfortable. Why? Because he was reenacting the trauma in the bedroom. And so when it came to embracing each other and trying new things, it was very uncomfortable for the wife. And so she had an issue with that. And so when you get down to the root and find out, well, why do you think that pain is pleasing, or why do you want to see that person in pain in order to be satisfied, that became a real issue. I spent a lot of time on putting undefiled questions together so that you can have a full understanding on what undefiled specifically means for your bedroom. And I'm thinking, when my daughter, when she was about 7 years old, she had saved up a lot of money. Like my daughter, she would save all the time. I don't know what happened, but back then she used to save. She don't do that today, but back then when she was 7, she saved a lot of money. She was able to buy her TV with a little DVD player. I think it was like $200. She saved all that money, and then she had some money left over where she was able to, buy me a watch for Christmas. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because when she bought me that watch, that's the last bit of all the money that she had. That was it. And she took her last, and she paid a price for her that was even too high to pay. Okay. And she used it to buy something that she felt that I would love. And so that was her gift to me. And so what that did for me was I valued that gift. I valued that watch. I cherished it. And I had that watch for many, 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 many years. Like I refused to get rid of it because she paid a price that was so high that I wanted to make sure that I took care of it. Even though it was a Mickey Mouse watch, y'all. So in my adult life, I still wore it because she paid the price for it. I understood what that meant, what that did for her. Why am I sharing this? Because when you're thinking about honoring and your intentions and all of that, you have to think about the fact that God paid a price for everything it is that we do by offering us his son, right? And so we have to think about even our bedrooms. Like, we cannot defile. We must honor this thing, honor our intimate space, because that's what undefiled is. Undefiled is honoring your intimate space, because God paid a price for it. He paid a price that was so high we couldn't even afford to pay. And so we have to in turn honor and cherish that. And that includes our bedroom. It's the Hebrews 13:4 says that the marriage bed is undefiled, but that we must honor it and make sure that we keep it pure. And so when it comes to these undefiled questions and understand, we have to be in agreement. Amos 3:3 says, how can two walk together unless we have agreed? We have to be in full agreement. You and your spouse have to be in full agreement on what it is that you implement. And agreement doesn't mean coerce. It doesn't mean manipulation. It doesn't mean forcing someone to do something and making them feel guilty about what it is that they want to implement. It means, I want to bring this to your attention. You want to bring this to my attention. Let's talk about it. And either we're going to do it or we're not. Okay? We have to be completely on board with it. Knowing that if we implement this thing, you still need that safe space. You still need that security and to be able to come to each other and open up, because this is where trust and vulnerability is birthed, y'all. Remember the couple that I talked about earlier, where they talked about what they wanted to implement, and then they implemented it, and then the husband went left, right? They were not in full agreement. There was no security involved. What did that do? Instead of bringing them together, it tore them apart. Why? Because they were not in agreement. At the end of the day, they did not, he was not in agreement. Even though he was the one that said, let's implement this, they were not in full agreement. He did not understand to what levels that it was. He did not understand the impact that it was going to have. And you have to be able to be comfortable with your spouse enough to have these conversations. Now, the next question in the undefiled test that you and your spouse would need to answer towards each other is, aside from agreement, is this thing going to be beneficial to us? Is there enjoyment? 1 Corinthians 7:3 says, the husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. There's mutual enjoyment here. This is God saying you are supposed to fulfill your husband and your husband is supposed to fulfill you. There is a mutual responsibility to cater to each other's needs. And so if you're going to implement something, there has to be a mutual satisfaction in the process, meaning that you have to be mutually satisfied and they also have to be mutually satisfied. If you're not going to enjoy, or if it's something that you're not going to enjoy, then it's something that you should not be doing. Remember, what is okay to do does not mean you should do all the time. You have to talk about it. You have to discuss it. You have to talk about it. Okay. And the last point in that, the undefiled test that I have, is it allowing us to be one? Is it allowing us to become one? Everything that you do in your bedroom should be allowing you to implement the process of uniting, coming together as one. You and your spouse should always be united in the things that you do. That is a necessity. You have to be. Is it allowing you to grow in one? I'm going to always say one of my favorite quotes is by a theologian, John Piper, where he says the ultimate reason why we are sexual is to make God more deeply known. It's God becoming more deeply known within your experiences, because when you are becoming one, you are becoming one in tune with God and his reflection and everything that he designed for your marriage. And if that's not happening, then something is seriously wrong. Then you have to reevaluate your bedroom to make sure that the things that you are doing are pleasing to God. The things that you're doing is pleasing to God. And so I need you to understand that. Now, I'm going to wrap this up real quick, because that's the undefiled test in a nutshell on what can help you as to whether or not you're going to implement something in or not in your bedroom. It's not about, is this okay? Or it's not about, should I do this specific act? What it's really about is you and your spouse being on the same page about what you should do in your bedroom together, by responding to each other, connecting, communicating with each other on the things that you want to implement. Because you and your spouse should be so vulnerable and so transparent that you are okay with having conversations. The issues that we have about whether or not self-pleasure is allowed is because we lack communication. We lack the skills to talk about what it is that we truly desire and what we truly need and how we want to implement things within our lives. Right? I already went over the list of all the people who should not completely, absolutely indulge in self-pleasure. But there is a small percentage of people where it might not be an issue for you. If It's not a blanket yes or no as to whether or not marriage and masturbation should work. It has to be mutually satisfying, mutually beneficial. Mutually, you have to be on one accord. You have to be in agreement with each other. Your intentions have to be pure, and it cannot be something that is immoral for you to do. And so, because you can do moral things in an immoral way, I want to make mention to that because that is important. And so, I want you to understand that this video is a lot. There's a lot to consume, and there's a lot to think about. And so, at the end of the day, like, you and your spouse should be connected to God, and that there is absolutely nothing that prayer cannot do. And so you guys should always be in prayer about what you should and should not implement into your bedroom. I'm not going to say that masturbation is an absolute no, but it's also not an absolute yes. It really depends on your maturity level as a couple, your how healthy you are as a couple, your history, your past, and whether you are mature enough to even be able to engage in the conversation. Like, all of that takes growth. It takes time. It's not impossible, right? It's not an impossible act to do. It's just one that has to take a lot into consideration. And so I hope you understood this message, this podcast. I hope this was able to relate to you and identify in some particular way. I hope I was able to reach one, teach one, and all of that good stuff. If you have enjoyed this episode, please do not forget to, hit that like button. Don't forget to touch that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that share button. All right. So until next time, thank you for tuning in to this podcast. Until next time, I will see you on the next Married Sex Monday. Goodbye.